Pardon the loud music if you can hear it. My neighbors are black. Anywho, I think there's a psychological distinction that I think modern society needs to understand. There's an enormous difference between being a victim and constructing a permanent identity around victimhood. These are not synonymous. You can genuinely be mistreated. You can genuinely experience discrimination. You can inherit disadvantages that you didn't create. You can be betrayed, exploited, impoverished, abused, stereotyped, born into circumstances that dramatically make life more difficult than other people. And you can acknowledge those things, but there's a point at which the identification of injustice, it stops functioning as an explanation and starts to function as a psychological prison. Because after you've identified the problem, the next question is, well, what am I going to do about it? If you can produce an extraordinarily sophisticated explanation for why somebody else is responsible for your condition, but you can't produce a meaningful, measurable strategy for improving your condition, then your analysis is incomplete. And this is just a stagnating way of thinking. And I think one of the most pernicious things you can do as a human being is that virtually everything consequential in your life exists outside of your sphere of influence or self-determination or meritocracy. Essentially, what you're doing is you're just conditioning helplessness. Psychology has a concept called learned helplessness. In simple terms, repeated experiences of uncontrollability can teach people that their actions don't matter. Eventually, they may stop attempting to escape negative circumstances, even when opportunities for change become available. Now, when you imagine that principle operating culturally, imagine people constantly telling others the system determines everything, other groups determine everything, history determines everything, policies determine everything, politicians determine everything, the opposing group determines everything, the environment determines everything. Everybody determines your future except for you. And even if some of those external forces are genuinely influential, what psychological consequence do you think comes from repeatedly emphasizing powerlessness while rarely emphasizing agency? You have a situation where you create people who become extremely proficient at explaining their suffering and extraordinarily underdeveloped at escaping it. And that's the distinction that is important to make, because I'm not arguing that structural problems don't exist. I'm arguing that a structural analysis and personal agency are not mutually exclusive concepts. Two things can be true at the same time. Somebody can place an obstacle in front of you and you can still possess responsibility for determining your response to that obstacle. Your starting position may not be necessarily your fault. However, your available options, are really up to you. And if improvement is possible, then agency is indispensable. And this is where cognitive dissonance enters the conversation. Because when someone emerges from within a struggling collective and they begin identifying internal behaviors that are destructive, they just stay in that state. And, you could be talking about many different things, poor education, absent parenting. You could talk about financial irresponsibility. You could talk about glorifying criminality. You could talk about emotional volatility, anti-intellectualism, substance abuse, interpersonal dysfunction, the normalization of behavior that produces long-term negative outcomes. And instead of evaluating whether my criticism is empirically accurate, you just attack what I'm saying on the basis of loyalty. If I were to be talking about black people, it's you hate your own people, you're trying to impress white people, you're blaming the victims, you're a coon, you're a sellout. But none of these arguments actually refute the argument, and they never will be able to under any basis. And yes, that is me arrogantly making that proclamation because it's the truth. When we're acknowledging dysfunction, the only people that are choosing to not engage are the only people that are going to be constantly burdened by their own lack of a progressive mindset. Because no collective of human beings should ever become immune from self-criticism. And it shouldn't even matter why I'm saying what I'm saying. If it is for white approval, it doesn't matter. It's never been for white approval, but contend with the validity of my argument rather than just saying why I'm saying what I'm saying. Say what I'm saying prove that it's wrong, because you have criticism and you have contempt. You can criticize behavior without believing that the people exhibiting the behavior are inherently inferior. I'm not trying to say that these people are worth nothing, because cultures can change, behavior can change, incentive structures can change, crime rates can change, educational outcomes can change, economic conditions can change, family structures, family units, and nothing about dysfunctional behavior, if it is biological, it doesn't have to be permanent or immutable or unchanging. You can have a eugenic effect over time if you take good people from every group and you just mix them up and you create stronger and superior cultures. That's really what it is at the end of the day, because culture comes from people and we have to examine the quality of the people. And if the quality of the people just consistently leads them to critique people that are trying to uplift them, then nothing gets better. So we'll just see communities that'll have individuals in that group murdering each other. And instead of addressing those issues, somebody who merely calls that out, it's problematic. Instead of examining the cultural, interpersonal, structural issues, we're just complaining about the person that's just merely highlighting them. So, I mean, you can't simultaneously demand improvement while making honest diagnoses socially acceptable. At some point, you have to investigate, what can I do internally to change this? And it doesn't have to be turning a certain neighborhood into Wakanda overnight. It could just genuinely be being decent to each other. So that's what I think. I think human outcomes at the end of the day emerge from interactions, I would say. Your cultural attitude, your behavioral profile, because you could be in poverty and you could either choose to kill each other over resources, or you could choose to pool the money that you do make together. For example, to avoid being circuitous, Black Americans are amongst the most intelligent as well as the most economically, let's just say, for lack of better terms, stable. If you're comparing Black Americans who have went through oppression to Liberians who were not conquered, yes, white people might have been in that area for a very, very, very short amount of time, especially relative to Black Americans being colonized. Liberians make $700 a year, 700 US dollars a year. I don't even know what I could do with that, honestly. And I'm not saying that to belittle them, but it's really to point out that people in America, especially Black Americans, they have more opportunity than they realize, but there are certain cultural attitudes that are hampering that or tampering that. And I would say you can't build anything substantial if every disagreement just becomes a personal attack. That's really a prefrontal cortex issue. And you can't organize people if criticism is just immediately met with hostility. Sometimes things require important conversations, and a mature person has to be capable of hearing something uncomfortable and asking, is it true? That's it. Not, did that hurt my feelings or did I like that? It's just, is what this person's saying true? And if it is true, how do we offer a solution? Because the solution isn't calling me a coon and convincing your audience that I'm a coon. The solution is really simple: building Black people. And calling somebody like me a coon and saying that I'm against the interests of Black people. I'm not against the interests of anybody. I'm not pro-white, I'm not pro-Black, I'm pro-human. And I want everybody to flourish. My people are white, Black, Native American, Hispanic, as long as they're good people. And I don't care if the entire world isn't smart enough to get that understood. And I know that we're not going to be able to just all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. It's an echo chamber at the end of the day. We all have echo chambers. There's not a single ideology or philosophy that's shared by everybody. So I've heard people saying that, my views are unrealistic to attain. Is anything really even realistic to attain? Are we really able to attain world peace where everybody just gets along? No. Are we able to have somebody that's maybe a nihilist and says we should just all go out and murder each other? No, there will never be a world where everybody just gets along or where everybody just straight up hates each other. So what I advocate for is autonomy, agency, meritocracy from everybody. I don't want anybody to make excuses. And if you're a man, I would like to see you be a man. And being a man does not require you to just sit around all day complaining about what you think you're owed. I think if you do want to do that, then take it to the government, take it to the institutions. And even if that's not happening, find a way to build your own house, find a way to get land. And if somebody is denying you the access to that, then you might have to relocate somewhere else, and you might have to keep traveling until you find a corner of the earth where you can own land. Because if you think like you can't own land or property just because of racism, I mean, that's delusional. It's delusional. And if that is the case, then you'll have to just go somewhere else then. Because if you're going to just allow yourself to constantly live in a system that's holding you back, you're not going to get anywhere. So you can either realize that there are avenues that you can take that'll make you successful, or you can just simply say, well, this system is holding me down, so what? You just achieve nothing, you don't travel anywhere else. You know, if it's a racial thing, then how would the land of your ancestors look and treat you? I'm not saying all black people should just leave, but I'm saying if you have that mindset that America is so against you, then why would you even want to live in America? Why wouldn't you want to live amongst your kin? It's just not something that makes any sense. I'm not saying all black people should leave. I'm not saying all whites or all whatever, but I'm saying if you're constantly finding yourself immiserated by the circumstances of your nation, then perhaps relocation is just the logical step, especially if you don't have the willingness, desire, or capacity / capability to actually change the system that you're complaining about. If you don't have the power or the desire to be the change you wish to see in the world, then you just might have to change your environment. If you can't change the environment, then you have to change the environment. You understand? If you can't change the environment, then you just have to change your environment. So that's what I think. But then again, I am a man, and maybe that's why I have these views, because I'm not a child or a woman, and I don't find much utility living in a constant state of complaining. And people can say, yes, men complain, but I would say that they're adult males. That's probably the best way I would categorize that.